Hello, welcome into another edition of Everyone Has a Story. My name is Herb Howard. I am the guest host filling in for the brilliant brother, Mr. Marcus Jones. He has decided, after 10 years of running this phenomenal show, he's decided to go behind the camera and get into some more of the technical side and creative side of the show. So Marcus Jones, salute to you on a decade of excellence in front of the camera. We look forward to more of that excellence now that you are behind the camera. With that being said, we are absolutely thrilled and honored to be joined live in studio by brother William Calloway. He is one of Chicago's very finest, one of the best gems that the city has to offer. He is an activist of the highest order, and he is also the founder of Christian Air. William Calloway, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Thank you, brother. Good to be here with you.
Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time out, man. So tell us a little bit about, for those of us who may not know, who is William Calloway?
William Calloway, depend who you ask.
That's with all of us, right?
If you ask me though, William Calloway is just a South Side native, South Shore resident, a product of the Chicago black community, somebody who's just a concerned citizen, somebody who loves God, try to hear the voice of God as much as he can, and somebody who just want to make some type of change. Tangible change, no matter how big or how small, while he's here. And we definitely want to leave a mark, a positive mark, and try to leave the world better than, I found it. So that's a little bit about Will Calloway.
Sounds like a great recipe to success. You got all the tools you need to do those things. You're talking about the desire to want to bring about change.
Yeah.
And not necessarily focusing on the end, but just focusing on the day-to-day, trying to bring about that change, whether it be small or large. And then having the faith in God to say, hey, I know there's a higher power. I'm going to tap into that to see what should I be doing, helping me move, because it's a tough road to navigate when you're talking about being an activist, especially in a city like Chicago, and you're going to need some guidance of a higher power.
Man, no doubt. When I first got into activism, I think people were so surprised that I was like a believer. So before we marched or protested, I'd be like, hold up, let's all pray.
Got to, right?
You know what I'm saying? That was so important to me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in the activist community, it's real secular. It's not and you have your atheists and non-believers, but I think they respect the fact that my work speaks for itself, and my work is really driven by God. It's God driven, and I think as a result of that, it built a lot of respect amongst the activist community.
Yeah, for me personally, it's not even about like religion, so to speak. It's just that spiritual awareness and knowing that there is a higher power.
Yep.
And if nothing else, if all it does is it makes me feel better about what it is I'm trying to accomplish as I go through my day-to-day, then it's more than worth it, right? If just taking those few moments to stop and pray and say, hey, guide my steps, guide my words, guide my actions and my thoughts, then I feel better about what I'm about to do, then it's well worth it.
Yeah, and it teaches you a lot about self and just the love. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest component in activism. I think a lot of people think that this is driven off anger and hate, and when it's not. I mean, you got anger, but it's righteous anger, right? But that derives as a result of love, because I love my community. I love people.
Otherwise, those things wouldn't upset you.
It wouldn't exactly, and I think that's what people fail to realize, and that's the spiritual component. Is really being self-grounded in love.
It's important that you mention that the work is love-based, right? Because
absolutely,
oftentimes you can find people and they'll say, okay, it's about them, or it's about even money or notoriety or fame, but really it has to be, if you're going to be successful, it has to be about the love. It has to be about having a genuine love and care for your people, and what can I do to serve my community? What can I do to help my community reach its fullest potential? Because we know it's full. There's a limitless potential within our communities, hard as that is to see as you look at some of the state of some of our communities now, but we know that it's there. But if you have that love, that's what allows you to push through on those tough days when you meet those roadblocks and you feel a little drained.
Absolutely. And I think if you look in our community, especially in community that have high levels of crime, right? And you see some of the youth or the community members that's making up this crime, right? And you sit back and you assess where they come from and where they're at in life, and you realize that they have a lot of hopelessness about themselves, right?
Yeah.
Especially the black youth, right?
Yeah.
And I think that love is a big component on to really steering them away from a life of crime. I think it goes a long way, not just to provide somebody a job, but to
Right.
make sure they know that you love them.
No, it's important. I think you have to start there, right? Even
For
when
sure.
you're talking about approaching them and trying to get them to change some of their behaviors or some of their decision making,
For sure.
you have to do that from a place of love first.
Yep.
And then you can get them to start thinking about different things, because you can't walk up to them, the first thing you say can't be, pull your pants up. Stop. Like, that can't be first,
Exactly.
right? Sure, I want them to pull their pants up too, but that's not the most important thing.
Right.
How you doing first? Have you had something to eat? Let me talk to you a little bit. Once they see that face and understand that you care about them, now they're more inclined to listen to what you have to say and kind of follow your leadership. But you can't, it has to start with that love. And it's simple acts of just saying hello, speaking to each other as we walk past each other. We are so bad at just the small things, just saying hello, how you doing, really caring what's happening with your neighbor, really knowing who the young people are on your block and speaking to them, and not first not being afraid of them, and then showing them that love. That's the very first step.
That's good. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. So you started Christianaire.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Christianaire. Christianaire was something God gave me back in 2007. Christianaire is a non-for-profit organization. At first, it was really, when I first converted my life over to Christianity, all my friends from the street like, man, what made you change? What made you change? And I had a passion for the arts. And I wanted to create a documentary to talk about my conversion and what influenced me to change, right? Just so people could stop asking, like, here, watch this movie.
Right. Here you go.
You know what I'm saying? Right, so Christianaire really came from that. But as I grew, the ideas and Christianaire grew, right? And so it just went from just making it a media arts sort of organization to this community outreach organization to this civil rights movement type of organization. And that's where we at this point in 2018. I'm really focused on community outreach, community organization, and just bringing solidarity amongst a lot of us and throughout the city of Chicago.
When did you start Christianaire?
In 2007. I founded Christianaire in 2007. I think the notoriety of like my organization and myself as ED of the org really started to get that notoriety around 2014, 2015. Because I think that's when I became more outspoken about community issues, right? And I think that's when people are like, okay, that's Will Calloway from Christianaire.
Talk about that fearlessness, and I want to build upon how that popularity has grown, or notoriety. I'll use that term as opposed to popularity, notoriety of the work. But the fearlessness that it takes when you're talking about standing up for what you believe in, standing up for your people, and speaking truth to power. Is that something that you have to develop? Is that something that you have to work on, or is it something that you just have to overcome? How do you go about stepping into that fearless space and doing what needs to be done?
I think it's a combination of all three, all that you spoke of, and I think that once you sort of feel convicted enough about an issue, you know, I'm not any different than anybody else, and I always like that to be known. I'm no different than any red line commuter, anybody that take the 6 bus or the Jeffrey jump. If we hear about something on the news and we on the corner talking about it, when we in our backyards talking about it, I'm no different than that person, right? The only thing that differentiates me from anybody else is just the action, you know, is that I don't want to just talk about this no more, right? We have to do something about it, right? And when I started feeling that way, and I know that was God like really pushing me, that's when I think the notoriety started getting more, because not only did you start putting action behind your words, but then you start having some results. And I think that's what people were starting to like, okay, he not just talking, he doing. Not only is he doing, he's accomplishing. And so I think that's when the notoriety started to begin because of that.
That notoriety has taken off, and one of the things that you're most notarized for is the work that you've done in and around the Laquan McDonald case. Laquan McDonald, for anyone who may not know still at this point, was murdered by a Chicago police officer. He was shot 16 times on the street, and you have done a lot of work around that case and just trying to get to the truth and trying to get the truth to come out, even to the point of trying to get the video released. But for the work that you've done, we may have never ever seen the tape where he was brutally murdered live on camera.
Yeah, so God is good. If it wasn't for God, that video would never came out. I was just merely an instrument to get that tape out. But without that tape, a lot in the city wouldn't have been exposed. The bureaucracy in the city government, the code of silence in the police department, and even a lot of more things in Laquan's personal life. He was a ward of the state, so I mean, to talk about DCFS is important. He also was in and out of detention centers as a youth, so to talk about the criminal justice system is also important. So it's so many different things to touch on in regards to Laquan's life. But yeah, to go back to getting the tape out, yeah, that notoriety from that, it did show a lot. But I think, or I hope, that it was to shine a light on the darkness surrounding everything, surrounding Laquan's case, you know? You know what I'm saying?
No, I do. I completely understand what you're saying. And I want to commend you on how you've used that notoriety going forward. Just last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now at this point, perhaps even 3, but anyway, you put together a dinner. You put together a dinner for many different activists and organizations, individuals alike from around the city to come together and say, hey, let's break bread together, let's have a meal, let's talk about some things, let's come up with some ideas and some action steps for how we can move forward. Talk about your desire to bring together all of these like-minded individuals and organizations to say, hey, I know you're doing great work over there. I know you guys are doing great work over there. But we have to do those things together.
Yeah, it's so solidarity is so important to me. It's just so important to me. Just unity, bringing us together regardless of our professions, our social class, our ethnicity. It's just solidarity is so important to me. And there's so many people that do great work around this city, those I know and some that I don't. And, you know, this MLK dinner that you speak of, that thanks for coming, by the way.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So it was my way of just saying, to commending you guys for all the work that you do. Because I know from the work that I do, just personally, that it's thankless work. Sometimes you don't get a thank you. Sometimes you be like, why am I doing this? You know what I mean? And I don't want anybody to feel discouraged. When you do feel discouraged, I just want people to be reminded of things like the dinner, and to be like, you know, the labor that you do is not in vain. So it's important to bring people that do great work together, and that MLK dinner was really to do that and to highlight the work that people do, and it was my way to say thank you. And to really talk this year about contingency planning, and that was the emphasis this year. Contingency planning regarding the up-and-coming trial, Jason Van Dyke.
And we're certainly going to get into that. But when you're talking about people coming together, right? When you're talking about bringing everybody together, there's something that has to take place when you're talking about people who have put in a lot of time and effort into their own individual projects. And when you talk about trying to bring that together, what are some of the obstacles that you face in trying to get those people to come together? Because I often talk about the burnout that can come along with doing this work. And that burnout, sure, it comes from people who don't yet know that there's a problem, or they have that hopelessness that, hey, we can't fix this, we can't overcome these challenges. But for me, a lot of that burnout comes from the very same people who are already doing the work, the people who are actually in the fight and committed to it. But it's like sometimes that selfishness comes in, the ego kicks in. It's like, you're trying to do these things, but you don't want to work with anybody. It's all about your idea, your idea, your idea, which is fine. Your idea is awesome, but we have to be able to tie those things in. How do you go about trying to get people to say, hey, it's more important that we do the greater good for more of us than it is for me to just continue to push my own personal agenda?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not easy. No. I'd be naive or be a little bit deceiving if I said it was easy. You know, and I think anytime you're dealing with human capital, it's going to be a challenge, right? Because we're not robots, and we're going to have our own ideas, and we're going to have our own agendas at times. But I think that we have to find the commonality amongst each other, and what's the common denominator amongst all of us? What is it that's bringing all us together, right? And then once if we can really humble ourselves and say, okay, this is the most important issue, right? How can I remove myself right? But not remove my resources or my gifts and skill set to make this situation better for the greater good of everybody. And I think that's a little bit more of a longer conversation we have to have amongst each other.
Sure.
But it starts with things like the dinner, right? And it starts with these conversations, us conversing about this on how we can work together. But it's not easy, and you might, stumble a couple of times with the people that you work with.
Sure.
I know I have, and I think that as long as we know that our heart is aligned with the right place, which is for the people and working with the people.
Right.
And as long as we stay focused and centered on that, I don't think there's nothing that we can't do.
No, it's just about constantly reminding yourself why you started, right?
Exactly.
Like you didn't start this for it to be about you. You started it for it to be about the people, about the community. And as long as you constantly remind yourself of why you started it, then I think it makes it a little bit easier when it's time to compromise, time to let go of an idea that you've been holding on to for the greater good. So again, I commend you for not only caring about the issues and then taking that into action, but then having the wherewithal to understand that we have to bring these people together, and then going about doing that, because like you said, it's not an easy thing. So I commend you for doing that.
Thank you, brother.
Very good work. Very, very good work.
Thank you.
So you alluded to it, and you brought it up at the dinner, and it was a challenge, right? Even at the dinner, you brought up the Jason Van Dyke. He is the Chicago police officer who murdered Laquan McDonald. His impending trial is likely to begin this summer, and let me just say, me personally, there's nothing in the history of this country that would lead me to believe that he's not going to be acquitted, right?
That's fair.
Hope that he's not, right? I hope that he's found guilty and justice is done for the crime that he committed. But
fair.
There's nothing in the history that says that that's going to happen. And so for me, I'm preparing myself for the likelihood that he's going to be acquitted. You brought this up at the MLK dinner, and you posed the question to everyone in the audience: how are we going to respond? What type of things do we need to put in place in case he is acquitted? Because the last thing that I think we want is for us to not have a plan, and so that closing arguments are made, the jury comes back not guilty, he walks out of the courtroom, city goes up in arms. Like, we don't. That's what we do not want. We want to be able to have a strategic reaction to it. You pose that question, and in the room with so many people who do so similar work that think alike, there were tons of different answers. At my own table, 6 of us sit at the table, 6 different ideas. You said you guys have 15 minutes to break out and talk about it. 20 minutes later, we still like, I don't like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
One, how do you think we should respond? And how do we go about making sure that response is organized and effective?
That's good. That's good. Again, thank you for coming, and thank you for being one of the thought leaders at that discussion that night. How should we respond? So that's a bearing of responsibility I don't want just to be delegated on myself.
Let me not say should. How?
But individually, individually, I get it, because I put that on y'all too. Like, how should we respond, right? I just don't want to go on the record like Will said, let's do this.
That's what we're doing.
Right. So, so it was 4 pillars that I wanted us to discuss on what we should focus on. The first pillar was rapid mobilization. The second pillar was sustainable, peaceful demonstration, right? The third one was social and policy changes. And the fourth one was like this media content and controlling the narrative. So we are telling the world what is going on here in Chicago and making sure that narrative doesn't change, and they don't villainize Laquan, and they don't try to say, oh, he had it coming to him and stuff like that. So I think it's important for all of us to start leading think tank discussions in those 4 categories, in those 4 pillars, and then come up with things. It depends, like for me, it depends on the day. You know what I'm saying? What mood I'm in, because I know it's trauma that's associated with this. So and if I hear Laquan name sometimes, or I hear 16, I could just hit the word 16. And the average person just hit 16 and don't think nothing of it. But if I hit 16, I'm automatically, my mind goes to a teenager being shot. And that's the trauma that has come with me. So it depends on the day or the mood that I'm in, I'd be like, well, we just gonna.
I think that's why what you're doing is so important, right? And kind of like preemptively thinking it out, like thinking through what we should do, because we, like you say, we're all just talking about human beings, right? We all are emotional. We all have emotional responses to things, and it can depend on how we're feeling on the day that verdict comes in. That's why I think it's important that we have something set in place that already says, okay, this is how we're going to move. This is how we're going to react. And I guess if I can move away from what exactly it is that we should do, because like I said, a room full of hundreds of people who work in activism on a daily basis came up with dozens, if not hundreds of different answers. And so as opposed to saying, what should we do? How can we go about making sure that all of us are on the same page, whatever it is we choose to do?
Absolutely. So that was the precursor for the contingency planning efforts that are about to come forth, right? And we're going to roll out more social media content, website development that people could be in tune and things like that. Make sure we have mass mobile alerts that people could sign up for, emails, et cetera, et cetera. But each week, starting probably next week, we're going to have these town hall discussions in different communities all across the city leading up to the trial. And that way we can get community input, right? So we all could be on one accord. And then I think closer to the trial, we can sort of roll out a concrete contingency plan. And like, this is what we're going to do. When a jury starts, that's if he chooses a jury. If the jury deliberates, while the jury is deliberating, we have these things in motion when the verdict is announced, or when a judge comes back on his decision. We have these things already in place to mobilize and to be enacted once the verdict is announced.
A couple of things were mentioned at the MLK dinner that pertaining to the case that I've put a lot of thought into ever since. And one was the actual indictment, the actual charge, right? Someone mentioned that he's charged with first-degree murder, and mentioned the possibility that he was mischarged, right? That perhaps he should not have been charged with first-degree murder, perhaps he should have been charged with second-degree murder or manslaughter or some other crime, because first-degree murder is harder to prove. It comes with some premeditated intent, and those things are harder to prove. And so it was posed that perhaps he was mischarged intentionally with the idea of him being acquitted based on that technicality.
That's good.
The other thing that came up, and actually I don't know if that came up that night, this is something that I read later, that they're trying to be able to introduce Laquan McDonald's past, his criminal history, his history of any history of violence that he may have shown in his past into the case, as a way to say that Jason Van Dyke was defending himself. To me, that is absolutely ridiculous, because you had no way of knowing these things, right? If Laquan McDonald were the most violent person to have ever walked the face of this earth, Jason Van Dyke didn't know that before he unloaded his service weapon into him.
He didn't.
So for that to be able to be introduced into his trial as a way for him to prove self-defense seems really, really ridiculous to me. So let me ask you, do you think that this trial is going to be fair in terms of everything from the actual charge to everything they're going to try and introduce into the case?
No, it wasn't fair when it started. It wasn't fair. The only reason just for the record, to make clear to your viewers, the only reason that he was charged is because that video was ordered to be released. If that video was never ordered to release, he would never have been charged. I don't believe that. I don't believe I'm going to go even farther. On state charges, he would have never been charged. But the FBI was also doing an investigation under the Obama administration, and they never charged him for civil rights violation. You know, and we clearly see as a community, the whole world watched that video and saw the same thing. We saw murder. We saw intent to kill, right? For you to go back to the charge, when I got into activism, a lot of people don't know this. I got into activism when I was creating a documentary. I was at a seminar or a conference about police violence in 2012. Rekia Boyd, she was murdered by Chicago police. The officer who killed her was undercharged. He was charged with manslaughter, right? And then ultimately the judge acquitted him because he said that same state's attorney, Anita Alvarez, undercharged him or mischarged or undercharged him, right? And so he got off. And so it's a lot of wondering right now, was Van Dyke overcharged, right? Because you have to prove intent, you have to prove that he premeditated this, and et cetera, et cetera. So some people leave second degree. It would be the most appropriate charge for it, you know, or just throw the book at him and whatever sticks. But I feel that way. I mean, I share that same concern like everybody else, that he's possibly undercharged, but that's where we at.
Unfortunately, it's just going to come down to these little technicalities because, like you said, you can't watch the video and come to any other conclusion. Not a reasonable person comes to any other conclusion that he murdered Laquan McDonald.
Period.
Period. Point blank. You shot him 16 times for what reason?
14 while he was on the ground. Like,
you know what I mean? And you weren't the only officer on the scene. So how did you see fit to fire your weapon 16 times when no other officer did? Like that in and of itself tells me that you committed a crime. Yeah. If there was a reason to unload your weapon, you wouldn't have been the only one who done so.
No, I think it was about 6 first responding officers on the scene with their guns drawn. And even police officer Walsh, which was Jason Van Dyke's partner, he had his gun drawn at the same time, side by side by Jason Van Dyke, didn't fire one shot. And so that really just goes and shows you the excessive force on the behalf of Jason Van Dyke and the criminality behind it and why he needs to be held accountable for what he did.
And that also goes into something that you mentioned earlier, which is the culture of silence amongst the police department, because as an officer, you're on that scene. I mean, First of all, we want all the officers to make it home safely, right? They're doing the job. We want them to get home to their families each and every day, right? So we understand the seriousness that they approach all of these calls when they arrive at a scene such as the one that was taking place that night. But if you're all these other officers on the scene and you didn't see fit to fire your weapon one time, but you're hearing and seeing this man shoot shot after shot after shot after shot, you something inside you has to say, this is wrong, and whether I wear blue or not, I can't really stand by and pretend that this is okay. Yeah. And I don't know how we go about breaking down that code of silence in the police department.
I think it starts with us holding the police accountable that corroborated their police reports. It was 9 different officers that signed off on their police reports saying, giving descriptions of a contrary of what we saw in the video, and out of those 9, most of them been fired or left the department, but only 3 been charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. And those same police officers are scheduled to go on trial next month. But we have to make sure that those police officers, we have to make an example out of them and make sure that they're held accountable for their actions.
Now, I want to switch gears just a little bit and get into, you dipped your foot into the political pond here recently.
What a pond that was.
You dipped your foot into that, and I want to get your experience on that, but I would want to say that as I was looking around the room at the MLK dinner, the people who were in the room, the people that you were able to have come all in the same room from all the foundations, whether Chicago Community Trust or it was former Governor Pat Quinn was in the room, and all these different organizations and individuals that you were able to bring together in one room, to me, that speaks highly of your potential as a political leader in our city, in our state, in our country, because it's going to take someone who is able to bring these different people together for common causes to say, hey, let's put aside our own individual differences for the common good. Speak on your ability to bring people together and why that's so important.
I just think that just goes again to just the love of community that we all share. You know what I mean? And just really separating myself from differences from anybody. And I think that's what I also wanted to display. Like, look, we all in this together. You know what I mean? Like, if we don't have any no commonality in anything else, at least it's in friendship. Like, at least me, like we're all friends or close associates. You know, through me, and that means we all in this together. We're all somewhere. We're also interrelated in some type of way. And I just, you know, I built relationships or building relationships with a lot of people in that room over the past several years. And I want to continue to do that. And I think that's, again, just important just to build them relationships. And it's just great people. Just all of you are just really great people, and I admire what y'all do. And it just speak on our sort of untapped in commonality that we all have with each other that we don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we all in this together.
I agree 100%, man. It's critically important. We were speaking off camera before the show that no matter what particular focus area that you have in this fight to help our communities reach its fullest potential, whether your focus is education and mentorship or it's business development or whatever it may be, critical as that work is, it has to be done together, because the systems of oppression that we face in our community, they're very well organized. From education to the justice system to the financial arena, all of those things are very well organized to bring about the demise of our communities, in my opinion. And if we're going to combat those things, we have to be just as organized, if not more so. And so it's important that we have those people come together and say, hey, we're going to do these types of works together. So with that being said, well, let's talk about your initial experience into the political arena. How was that experience? What were you running for? And how, what did you learn throughout that experience?
I should call my counselor, make sure it's okay I talk about this. I don't get too crazy. My initial experience, it was dope. I ran for 25th District, state representative of the 25th District. Current incumbent is Barbara Flynn Curry. She's the majority leader for the Democrats in the House. It was a great experience. You spoke about that pond. The thing about the pond is what people don't tell you, and I worked on campaigns before, but it's nothing like being the actual candidate. And that pond is full of sharks. That pond is full of piranhas. And that pond is full of quicksand, right? And you got to know how to maneuver in that pond. And it don't matter how many campaigns you worked on before. It's nothing like when you're the candidate. You know what I mean? And it was a great learning experience. I learned a lot about people, even more like about my community and people and people agendas and their hearts. But I also, most importantly, I learned about myself. I learned about endurance. I learned about patience. I learned about, you know, being able to be liquid and be able to adjust at a moment's notice. And that's something that I had to learn quickly, and to be a leader, you know, for my staff and my volunteers. And I think it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's not for the faint of heart, especially in Chicago, with the politics here, which is very unique. But the politics here, and just learning. It was a great learning experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world at all.
One thing I really admire about you is that you always acknowledge the challenges that lay ahead, the obstacles, the traps in the road, but as soon as you're done acknowledging it, you're on to how to overcome it. And so you talk about the sharks in the water, you talk about the people, the agendas, the attitudes, the attacks, but then instantly you say, but I learned about perseverance. I learned about being resilient, how to overcome those things. And that to me is what makes you a great candidate for leadership, whether it's in some official political capacity or just in the community on a daily basis, because you're going to come across the same things. You're going to face these challenges and these hurdles, and it's important that you recognize them and know that they're there. But then as soon as you recognize them and understand that they're there, it's about how to defeat them, how to get over it. And you constantly display your ability to do that, to acknowledge and be aware of the challenges, but then to set up your plan of attack for how to get over them. And so with that being said, perhaps will there be a future run for William Calloway?
Yeah, I would like to think so, man. I think we did really well for our first time running. We didn't win, obviously, but I received over 14,000 votes.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people to say you should
people.
hold an office.
A lot of people that be like, you are the guy that can lead us forward.
To lead, you know, and I don't take that lightly. And I really think that I should, you know, we have to still mobilize and capitalize off of that movement. But I see something in the future. You know, I had to, you know, discuss that with family and friends and, you know, my creator. But yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, once you've prayed on it and discussed it with your family, man, and you're ready to make that announcement, I greatly look forward to hearing it, and I'm certainly here to do anything I can to make sure that whatever office you choose to run for, that you are successful in gaining that seat, because I think you deserve it, and I think you would be excellent at it.
Oh, man, that's humbling. Thank you so much, man. We need to really focus. This is the activist part of me. Focus. It's not just Chicagoan. This is the Chicagoan in me. We really, really need to concentrate on this mayoral race, because we need, in my opinion, we need new mayoral leadership and also city council leadership. And I think that's something I want your viewers to know, that please get involved, find out who your alderman is, and make sure that anybody but our current administration is in office next year.
Now, when you say anybody but our current administration, that kind of leads me to our next question, and that is, with the mayoral election coming up, and there being so many candidates that have thrown their hat in.
Yes, sir.
For me, I have a bit of a concern that perhaps we're going to split the vote, and then Rahm is going to steal the election again, even if he only steals it with 35, 40%, because we've split up 17, 18, 20, 21 over here, and he's able to win it with 30, 35, 40%. Does that something that concerns you? And if it is, how can we overcome it to make sure that we don't split that vote so much to where he can sneak in through the back door?
Yeah, so the good thing, bad thing, the thing about this is that you got people like Gary McCarthy running and Paul Vallis running, right? So they're going to draw from Rahm's base, okay? And then you have several African-American candidates running as well. And I get that vote is going to be split. If you, i.e. Willie Wilson, Dorothy Brown, right? They both come from the church community, and the black church comes out a lot to vote. So they're going to split each other's votes a lot, right? You got Troy LaRaviere running, you know, is a very smart guy. Amara hasn't announced yet. But I say that to say, either way, I believe it's going to be a runoff. So it'll be the top two contenders, and then we have to try to pick somebody from there. But I don't know, man. I believe in us. We really, you know, we see how things play after this summer and after this trial, and see what people is at.
Well, it's going to be a really big summer here in Chicago. We're looking forward to the election. Certainly looking forward to the Jason Van Dyke murder trial and the outcome of it. William Calloway, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. This has been Everyone Has a Story. I am Herb Howard. You all enjoy the rest of your day.
He's gone from gang member to mentor for troubled youth.
Harry Porterfield says Marcus Jones is someone you should know.
Ultimately, I made a bad decision, but the lure of the streets is so overwhelming.
Marcus Jones ran track at Hales Franciscan and played football at Kenwood Academy. What did the street life involve?
I joined the gang. It involved selling drugs. I thought that I was going to actually make $1 million in the streets. And that's what the street life is. It's the quick, instant gratification right there. It really does not work out that way. People wanted to get at me because I was making money. You know, so I then had to show that I was a tough guy.
And that decision changed the rest of his life. Tell us about April 17, 1995 at 7:49 a.m.
We entered another drug dealer's home, attempting to rob him, and he got the ups on us. My buddy, he said that dude has a gun. I got shot 2 times, the drug dealer. And he stood over me and he told me that I should kill you. And he shot me 2 more times. They took me to the hospital and I was terrified. And finally, the doctor came in and told me that I'd never be able to walk again.
He served a 10-year jail sentence for armed violence and has been in a wheelchair for 20. Now he wants others to learn from his mistakes. He works for the Black Star Project, offering tutoring, mentoring, and workforce development to low-income Black and Latino communities.
I love the youth. I love to speak to them. I go into the schools and do a motivational speaking and tell them about my life and tell them that, hey, you don't want to be in this here. You don't want to be in this chair.
Marcus Jones, a former gang member who has turned his life around, and he is someone you should know. This is the book that he has written, and it is called Everyone Has a Story. This is mine, he says, and you can find it on Amazon.
It really is incredible when someone turns their life around. Usually they're the ones that can really reach so many other youth that are already going down that path.
That's true. He was shot 4 times before he did it.
And you hope that somebody like that who's been through that can somehow make an impact on the people that are doing it right now, because they don't like to listen to most people, do they?
He can relate.
Yes, he can.